we can start off with this. And after 2-1 up in the series, the Mavericks are. Luka's been balling out. I mean, all the stuff with his first 9 games, and you see him statistically playing great, efficiency wise up there. And it's starting to make us beg the question, is Luka Doncic a top 5 player? And if not, what would he have to do to reach the top 5 of NBA players? But I'm going to pass this one to you first, Noel. Do you think Luka's top 5 now? And if not, what does he have to do to get there?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, he's been, like you said, balling out this series. Definitely is worthy of consideration for a top 5 player in the NBA. In my list, I think he's right outside. I think he's a fringer, probably in the 6 to 8 range. In my list, if I had to just off the top of my head name 5 players that I'd put over him, I'd go Bron and AD off the lake. I'd go KD. I'd go Jokic, and I'll throw Harden in there too on the Nets. But I would say for him to really get in the top 5 definitively, I would honestly like to see some more on the defensive side of the ball. If I saw Luka just swatting guys in this series like Kawhi or PG or just guys who could really score the ball and be a two-way player, because I know he can rebound and he passes the ball too. If I saw the defense, then I would say he'd be a top 5 lock in my opinion. So I guess that's the differentiator, but regardless, he's a baller.
Before I go, I heard Anthony Davis on that list, and I feel like that's a little away from consensus, especially given the season, a guy like Steph had, and the seasons that a guy like Giannis, you didn't have Giannis there, right?
I didn't have Giannis.
And the seasons Giannis he's had. So
over Luka, but I didn't have Giannis on my list too.
So I'd just like to hear your reasoning with Anthony Davis before we move on, why you think he's better than these guys.
Yeah, so I guess the biggest rationale I give is more on the defensive side of the ball, which I said Luka was missing because I do think AD is one of the few players in the league who can guard anyone. And I guess some guards could give him the shake and bake, but more or less could hang with any type of player. And I also think he's the type of player who's skilled enough on the offensive side of the ball who can get almost any shot he wants, almost like a KD type who was also on my list. So that would be my rationale, but I do understand with injuries and longevity, there are definitely questions around AD being a top 5 player.
That's fair. And just to piggyback, even though I don't have AD on my list, if you're just looking at individual offense, defense, like total skill set, I feel like the thing that AD lacks is the playmaking, which is why he can't carry rosters the way a Luka Doncic does. But if you're looking just as an individual player, what his impact offensively and defensively, yeah, he's probably one of the 5 most complete players in basketball. It's probably him, Giannis. I think Joel Embiid might be near that conversation. KD would be in that conversation. So definitely that's fair. I'm going to go a little different from you. I do think Luka Doncic is a top 5 player in basketball because I'm going to go to that playmaking aspect and in terms of being able to carry a team, because I don't think Luka Doncic's team has a second star. I really don't. I mean, we're not going to talk a lot about Kristaps Porzingis, but he's been pretty terrible in this series. I know his shooting numbers aren't terrible, and he's had a couple of outings in terms of total volume of points where it's looked good. But there's 2 things that are really problematic for me with Kristaps Porzingis. One, when you isolate him on a smaller player, he's taking 20-footers, 18-footers. He's not able to create good shots for himself, which is something you talked about that Anthony Davis does really well. And 2, he's a liability on defense because the injuries have left him with poor lateral mobility. So he's been getting, like you said, shake and bake. It's been shake and bake barbecue chicken on Kristaps Porzingis all day in this series. And so because of that, and you see the load Luka Doncic is carrying, and he's the primary playmaker on that team, and he's an unbelievable playmaker. He doesn't really force anything offensively, but he has an incredible way of still being able to score the ball against any type of defense, against any defender. One of my biggest questions with him was shooting. And I think this year there's been stretches where he shot the ball as well as he possibly could. There's been months where he's a 41, 42% shooter from 3, but then there's also been months where he's a 32% shooter from 3. He's had 3 playoff games in a row of 5+ 3-pointers made, so you can't really argue that. And, the other guys in my top 5, there's like 7 or 8 top 5 players in the NBA. That's the reality. There's like so many, but it would be like Bron, KD, Nikola Jokic, James Harden, and, I like Steph's incredible. He definitely should be there. But right now, I'm going to go with the recency bias and not include Giannis, not include Steph, not include Kawhi, not include AD, and include Luka Doncic, because I think what he's doing at 22 in this playoffs in particular against whether it's Kawhi Leonard, whether it's Paul George, whether it's Rajon Rondo, whether it's Marcus Morris, guys who all have reputations of being good defenders in the NBA, and Luka Doncic is just giving them all buckets. So I'm going to say yes, he is a top 5 player in the NBA.
Interesting. All right, so I guess I'm a little bit with both of you guys. I'm kind of on the fence right now, and I have a contingency in place, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit. But I think the Mavericks can make the Western Conference Finals this year. I really do. I think if they escape the first round of the Clippers, this is probably their toughest matchup. I'm a little more bearish on the Jazz than maybe other one seeds in the past, like LeBron-led teams or, the Warriors of the past few years. And I think if the Mavericks did play a team like the Jazz, they could advance. So I will say this: if Luka can make the Western Conference Finals with this roster, he's a certified top 5 player. No ifs, ands, or buts, no questions about it. Certified top 5. Now, I value the playoffs a lot when ranking top 5 players. That's kind of why I don't have Giannis in there. Giannis has 2 MVPs. That's more MVPs than Kobe Bryant has. But in the playoffs, he hasn't escaped the second round. He's shown he can get stopped by the wall. And, yeah, go on, Vish.
He did make the one Eastern Conference Finals.
Oh, that is fair.
Obviously, he struggled against Toronto.
Yes, sorry about that. But, yeah, he has shown struggles a lot in the playoffs against, the more quality teams, and that's where I struggle to have him in there. So, for me, the playmaking is top 5, and I think also just based on his value, and if you removed him from this Mavericks team, they would probably be a bottom 8 or 9 team. I think if you removed, say, Anthony Davis from the Lakers, I still think they'd be really good. If you removed KD or Harden from the Nets, they'd still be really, really good. You could maybe even remove Giannis from the Bucks, and I still think they'd be a quality team. But if you removed Luka from this team, their offense, I do not know what it would look like. But it would not even be remotely close to what it is just because of the usage of Luka and how good he is. So I got him top 5.
Interesting. All right, so being the only guy who didn't have Luka in the top 5, what I will say that's certified in my book is if you change this question to top 5 offensive player, I think it's near undisputed that Luka would be in there. Because I value defense so much, that was the main reason he didn't make it on mine. But I do like the contingency by the man Blake with if Luka leads his team to the Western Conference Finals this year and puts up a fight in there, I would maybe have to reevaluate some stuff. And he could very well be in my top 5.
So I think the defensive argument is fair when you're comparing him to the Anthony Davises and the Kevin Durants and even Giannis, who's an unbelievable defender. But here's my thing with the defense. I think that with the defense, one, when he first came into the NBA, he was bad on defense. I think he's no longer bad. I think he's okay. I think he's a better matchup for less explosive, bigger players because he's got a big body and he's really strong and he can bump them off and hold them off and contest shots and get rebounds. But I think the one thing he is he's pretty savvy and he gets himself into nice spots in terms of passing lanes. Or like we've seen a couple times in this series where he straight up just locks out Kawhi Leonard in the post. And usually Kawhi Leonard, if he gets to the post, he's getting the ball and he's going to be able to take the shot he wants. Luka does a great job of fronting him and basically preventing the entry pass, which not a lot of players in the NBA can do, but that's really impressive. So I do want to counter that defensive point where while I agree with you to an extent, I feel like when you're talking top 5, I think it's good enough, especially when we talk about guys like James Harden, who is in all 3 of our top 5. And James Harden's obviously not his defense. In 2014, he had a couple plays where he fell asleep and he was disinterested playing defense. And since then, he has a reputation that just doesn't hold true because he's actually not a bad defender. Same thing with Steph. Steph isn't the greatest defender in the world, but he's certainly turned himself into something a little around average and a bit more than average at times. It just depends on whether he's reaching in too much or not. But if Luka Doncic is right there and you say the offensive ability is top 5, which I agree with, I know Blake agrees with, then for me, when you look at what he's doing in this playoffs and you just look at what he's doing at 22, it's hard for me to say no, you're not a top 5 player. But again, it just goes back to the reality of the situation is that there's 8 or 9 top 5 players in the NBA. I mean, none of us mentioned Joel Embiid, and Joel Embiid is unbelievable. He should be a top 5 player. In any other NBA, he's a top 5 player, but there's now top 5 is like top 10 because there's so many good players in today's NBA.
Mm-hmm. And I did want to touch on what you said earlier, Vish, and his 3-point shooting. And that was kind of one of his biggest issues, my biggest issues, and other people's biggest issues with him was that, his step back three, and it looks awesome on highlights and stuff, but it isn't always the best shot. And he used to at least, miss it a lot more than he would actually make it. But I feel like maybe it's just, he just hates the Clippers and just loves just splashing threes on their face. But in the regular season too, even towards the end, his 3-point shooting was much improved. And I really think that if he's hitting threes like this, like over 40%, I don't know what his offensive weakness is besides the fact that he can't shoot free throws for whatever reason, because he draws fouls at an unbelievable rate. It's almost annoying watching some of the fouls he draws, but he's great at drawing fouls. And then just his touch in general is honestly unreal. I'd put it up there with almost anyone else, and just in the lane and even from the 3-point line now in mid-range. And then also his passing, like if he gets doubled, he knows exactly where he's going before the double's even there, and it's always in the pocket. Like you very rarely see an errant pass from him where it's just, man, I don't know what more playmaking he can do for this team, because they don't really have anyone else besides like maybe Jalen Brunson that playmakes for others, and he's the backup point guard. So that's kind of my, I guess, final statement for Luka. Do you guys have anything else to add?
Yeah, I have a question for Noel, because he talked about the defense, and you just brought up the free throw shooting, which is something we haven't talked about. Is that a reason you kept him out of the top 5? I mean, obviously, we've talked about how phenomenal he is, and I think we all agree, no matter what, he's one of the best players in the NBA, and his future is limitless. But the free throw shooting in particular is worrisome when he's the primary ball handler of a team that's closing games. You want your primary point guard or big guard or whatever Luka Doncic you want to classify him position-wise to be an 85+% free throw shooter, because it's very easy to close games if you can just get yourself to the free throw line, make 2 free throws. It slows the game. You can slow the game down, and those are 2 free shots, free 2 points. So is that a reason why you kept him off? Because I noticed the rest of your top 5. It was, I mean, KD's not, obviously LeBron's like 73%. That's not his strength, but KD's 90% or near there. Jokic is like 88%. James Harden's like 87%, 86%. Anthony Davis is like an 85% free throw shooter. At least he was last year. So is that a reason you kept him out?
I would say it goes into the reasoning, but it wasn't the biggest. I'd still say the defense was kind of the biggest. But I do agree with a lot of your counters and points on that, because he does stand in the spots very well, as in like posting up players who can historically get to their spots, like Kawhi Leonard in this series or other players. It's just more, and a lot of it is there's picks going there, but in terms of lateral quickness, a lot of times you can kind of get around Luka. I would say a little bit easier as opposed to other elite two-way stars in the league. So it was more of that, in my opinion. One thing I will add while we're still on this topic, it is top 5, I would say, of any top 5 player in the league. They have composure similar to that of Luka, whereas he's only 22, but in these big moments, he'll talk trash to other players. He'll stand up for himself. And when he's on the bench, he just looks dialed into me. I don't see too many emotional outbreaks from Luka. Sometimes there's a call or 2 that'll get him stirred up. But for his age, I think he's just very mature, and he's already got that top 5 player composure, in my opinion.
Fair enough. So bottom line, Nolan says no. Vish says yes. I have a contingency, so I kind of cheated, but I think it'll be yes by the end of the season to whether Luka Doncic is a top 5 player or not. Recently, we had a video saying the Clippers shouldn't be worried about him. We were all wrong. We were all entirely wrong. We'll be the first to say it. We did not think his shooting could be as good as it has been, but he's been making Zubac look like barbecue chicken out there. So really not much more to say. He's been putting him in a blender, putting everyone in the blender. So yeah, Luka Doncic, top 5. Drop in the comments what you guys think. But